Okay, welcome to Club Talk Hurling, joined this week by Derek McGrath, Waterford man of course, and Michael Verney, of course the pride of Offaly. We're going to go through all the different games across the country, just brought to you by Slattery, Sullivan Insurances in Nenagh. Call 067 56705 and get 10% off all new business quotes with the reference OurGame. Derek, just to start off with yourself, your thoughts at the moment, even just on going behind closed doors with games. We had 200 going at games, now a lot of that was officials anyway. What do you make of this step? Like, there was county finals, minor finals going on in Waterford on Wednesday night, and like, people were wondering, do I drop my kid at the gate and wait outside, or what do you make of the situation?
Yeah, I suppose the easiest way to answer it is anecdotally, in that I'd have a fairly good connection with a lot of the guys that were playing with Ballygunner in that minor final. Even my wife was working with some of the ladies that had sons playing in that match, and it's really ironic in that they were dropping the lads at the game there last night or Wednesday night, and they were actually gathering in a local hotel to watch the match as parents, because it was being streamed live through Abbeyside GA. So I was watching it here at home, but you probably had a congregation of probably up to 60 parents or 70 parents gathering in a local hotel to watch it, get something to eat. And I'd imagine they're safer in an environment where they're out in the air, with so much. But look, again, it's all probably, the context is that we're not experts in the area, but we're able to offer an opinion on what's going on. And it's just, there's just real ambiguity, I think, around the whole decision, I suppose, and a contradiction. And even being in around our own school in the last few days, huge amount of work being done in the school to get it up to COVID speed, shall we say, and then you can't go. My own son is playing under 15 against Ballygunner on Friday night, and the message is probably just to drop him there and not wait outside, I suppose. And that seems, I know there's a separate message from the GA yesterday in terms of, if you feel that for the welfare of your child, you should stay there. So there's kind of mixed messages, I suppose. The one thing I will say, and I'm probably not going to be not popular for saying this, but I'd say the worry, and I'm guessing here now, the worry that perhaps is coming from NPHET, etc., is maybe the whole culture that probably exists in GA clubs and every club, whereby if you're knocked out of the championship, you might be gathering for a few beers, or you might go out on a Monday, for instance, and I think that's the natural thing that's done in any club. We were knocked out of the championship here ourselves on Sunday, and I'd imagine the lads went for a few beers, and they might meet up on Monday in for a few beers somewhere as well. So I say, without knowing too much about it, that might be the kind of what they're trying to hit, if you like, that kind of that traditional culture that goes with meeting before or after a game, without having, as they call for, the empirical evidence. That's I'm only guessing as regards that's what they might be trying to hit, if you like. But largely you'd be kind of disgruntled at the decision. But there's part of me also saying these fellas are highly qualified clinicians in their own right, and you kind of have to take their advice on board.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying. You've obviously had great involvement this year with Faythe Harriers in the Wexford Championship, and we'll start off by talking about the final, Shelmaliers against Gorey, Nenagh. So Shelmaliers were the team that knocked you out in the quarterfinals, so you'd be very, very familiar with them. But first of all, what was it like, the journey with Faythe this year? Obviously I played in a challenge match with Cuala against you, and I was really, really impressed and surprised that you were knocked out in the quarterfinal.
Yeah, well, first of all, I think it was hugely enjoyable. From a personal point of view, I hadn't actually much in mind this year. Only I'm involved in the Laois minors, and I'm really enjoying that. And obviously, at the start of the year, then I was actually approached by a few clubs and that kind of stuff, and I was kind of saying no, I have no interest. But I met actually Lee Chin and the chairman of the Harriers, Nicky Keeling, at the start of the year, January, February, and the appeal of it was, I suppose, from a personal point of view, they were in relegation last year, so there was a sense of the only way it was up. They'd won 2 minor titles on the bounce. I'd known from my own nerdish kind of ways, I suppose, that Richie Lawler and these fellas are serious details, and they will be serious details into the future. So there was a kind of an appeal on a personal level where the only way was up type thing. So there was kind of a relaxed attitude to that, and then I grew up in the city myself, in the heart of Ballygunner in Waterford City, and the appeal of a town team to me was kind of the real characters. So you had a motley crew there of different type of characters, and that really appealed to me. You had every type of character, and I have to say I've never enjoyed anything as much in terms of my involvement with him. And you know, and really good people involved. The management team in place already in Zach Walsh and Dave Mooney and William Murphy and Shane Howard. So the role wasn't as kind of full on. It was more ancillary at the start, and that appealed to me as well in terms of just a pressure point, not having to organise everything. So enjoyed it. We toured the country, to be honest with you, during just after the COVID restrictions were lifted. Played Coolderry, we played yourselves in Cuala, we played Kilmacud Crokes, played Castlecomer, all in a short period of kind of time. And you know, I'd say there was probably a feeling that they weren't used to that type of exposure to challenge games. So we enjoyed those journeys. We travelled every one of them and played no game at home, and so they gave a great commitment. But at the end of the day, I suppose we were overwhelmed by a really, really good, physical, well organised team when it came to Shelmaliers. In actual fact, the only team we came across that were similar to them really were Kilmacud in terms of the physicality. Kilmacud put a nice few scores on us now up in not Glenalbin, I think it's Silver Park, is it? Or I'm not sure, Silver. Yeah. But Kilmacud looked to be going really well in a challenge match against us. So yeah, look, really impressive Shelmaliers team, albeit that, you know, it's a final as a final.
Michael, I'll throw it over to you for a second, because you were down watching, you were at the Wexford Championship not so long ago.
Yeah, no, I was at the Shelmaliers game against Derek's Faythe Harriers, actually. Very impressed by them. It's kind of funny. They're a classic case of, they look to me anyway to be a classic case of a sum of their parts. They mightn't have, you know, maybe one outstanding individual or one like kind of marquee forward, but they've just really, really well oiled, really well drilled. Derek will probably echo this, like a top Brian Malone, for a lad who's predominantly playing football. I thought he did a good job on Lee, a good man marking job, and has the physical attributes where he'd be able to stay with a top inter-county hurler like that. Glenn Malone, another kind of a towering force at wing back. Ross Banville was with the Wexford 20s last year, a good forward. Sean Keane Carroll, who wears 6 normally, playing the half forward line, very good player as well. I wasn't that surprised, probably no more than you were, Shane, that Shells got over Glen Barntown. I was just impressed with them that day against Faythe Harriers. They're going to be really, really hard to break down. Just looking at even the odds for this game, they're both, the bookies kind of have them at evens, each at 2, like, so they're finding it very, very hard to separate the two of them. Gorey have won 3 of their last 4 games by a point, including beating Shelmaliers in the group stages by a point. So since they got over the line in the 2018 final, they seem to have that kind of battle-hardened edge that where it comes down to a really, really tight game, they seem to be able to get over the line. It's going to be a really, really interesting game. Very, very hard to call. It'd be interesting to see if Derek has come across a fella that they're all raving about down in Wexford at the moment. Jack Cullen absolutely lauded it for Gorey in the semi-final. Was very good in the quarter-final as well. And I believe they've lost Owen Malloy, who's a good defender. Lost him to a cruciate injury in the quarter-final. But Jack Cullen, I think he's been in with Davy since the start of the year. But would you have seen much of him, Derek? People are absolutely raving about him. Apparently he was absolutely outstanding in their semi-final win of Oulart. Would you have seen much of him?
Yeah, well, the irony of it is I actually saw him playing against my own club just when the COVID restrictions are lifted. I went up to one of the nights in De La Salle where there was no restrictions. There were 400 people in watching the match, and then we were auditioning for tickets then, in a draw for tickets for the actual championship matches. But when it opened, Gorey actually played De La Salle in the challenge match, and De La Salle actually won very comprehensively. And Jack Cullen was wing back. He was on Kevin Moran, and very impressive. Now Kevin was good as well, if that makes sense. You know, the two of them were kind of good, but he's kind of a throwback player. Jack Cullen looks like, kind of just holds his position almost as a kind of physically imposing wing back, leave the wing forward, go deep down the field. And Kevin was getting a bit of joy out of going deep down the field. Boys were picking him out, and Kevin was, you know, making play from there. But invariably, if a ball went to the keeper, if you like, went to the Gorey keeper, or indeed went to the full back line, Jack Cullen was always that out ball, and he can score from distance, as we saw against Oulart as well. Very physically imposing player, and just very clever player in terms of position. It reminded me almost kind of a bigger version, almost, if there's possible to be a bigger version of Diarmaid Burns with Limerick, in terms of just the way he plays. He's left over right, kind of holds his own position, can score from distance, and yeah, hugely physically imposing player. So that's the first night I saw him. I'd have to hold my hands up in that I haven't been as familiar with the Wexford kind of club players that are not quite on the county panels as I should have been. And that probably, you know, I'd hold my hand up even in the Shelmaliers game when you talk about, you know, the Joe Kellys or the Brian Malones and the Glenn Malones or the Jody Donahues. you're dead right in terms of the Shelmaliers kind of approach, and similar with the Malays that are involved, or Brendan Travers that are involved with Gorey. My focus would have always been kind of on the Cathal Dunbars and the Conor McDonalds in terms of how they're going, and it doesn't kind of tell the full story of how strong both Gorey and Shelmaliers are. You're dead right with the sum of the parts, but yeah, he looks like a really physically imposing player. In the long term, you're looking at the Davy, way that Davy plays with such athleticism, with Sean Murphy at 7 and maybe Simon Donoghue at 5, bombing on from 5 and 7. Does he give you that? He probably doesn't, but he probably gives you an alternative to what Paddy Foley gives you in terms of a centre back that's a marking centre back, and that's kind of big and a physical presence. So I'd say he'll be on Davy's radar, because like a lot of players, managers, they have a free hit at it now. They can change it up, I suppose, if they want, ahead of the new season.
Derek, just a question then on the Wexford Championship compared with the Waterford Championship, for example. There are a lot of dual clubs in Wexford. Do you feel that there's much of a football influence in terms of how the clubs play?
Yeah, well, I think there is, and there's a Davy influence, if I'm completely honest. I'll give an example. We our 2 group games. Now, I've been long on the record of talking about this. So our 2 group games were against Ferns and Fethard. Ferns have always played with kind of a 7 defender. Everyone coming back down the field, coming up the field. Pat Bennett is a selector there, manager, coach. With obviously he's involved with Davy, has been involved with Davy for years. Shane and Stephen and Kieran's dad. We played Fethard. Similar kind of scenario. 2 corner forwards come out 50 yards from the goal, bring their men out with them. Everyone drops back the lines. The same with Shelmaliers. Whilst it looks conventional, and I see Simon Donoghue referring to kind of that they were conventional, they went man and man. I would consider them anything but. Everyone is coming. I've said it. I'm on the record. Even at inter-county level, Tip, Galway, Limerick. I think everyone is coming deep down the field, and if you can keep the ball on the way out and you don't hit it up to zonal defenders on the other side, it looks good. You're fine. Or if you can hit it, no different than Cuala over the years, Shane, when Con is in there on his own, if you like, or he might have one with him. When it goes in and Con is 1 against 3 and he wins it, there's nothing about it. Same with Gillan when he's in there 1 against 2, 1 against 3. So I would see a big influence. And look, the direct comparison is Ballygunner. I happen to be commentating on the Ballygunner 4-mile water game on Saturday night, and they rack up huge scores, but hugely organised defensively in terms of freeing up Philip Manny back into the pocket at times with their 2 wing forwards coming wide and deep, and Desi and maybe Kevin Manny, or Desi and Peter Hogan inside. So I think there's lots of similarities. I think football has had its effect on hurling, and I actually think it's a good effect. Fellas are more organised, they're keeping the ball, and they're varying it with good flexibility at times.
Yeah, and just to throw it back to you again there, Michael. So this final, Nenagh come into it with just a late winner against Owler de Bala. So they came through a tough game, like you're saying. That's been the case for them recently, whereas Shells hammered Glyn Barntown. All in all, what way do you see this going?
Oh, dear God, it's a very, very hard game to call, really. And as Derek said, we all are familiar with, the Conor McDonalds and the Cathal Dunbars. They're probably not going to be the lads that'll tip the scales. It's the likes of maybe a Pádraig Doyle with Nenagh, or a Ross Banville with Shelmaliers. It's a very, very difficult game to call. It's going to have a real weird feel to it. While there's been 200 in a game so far, including players and officials and all that crack, there's still been like a decent noise at games. The people that have been there have made noise. It's going to be a very, very strange one for players to be playing a game that is a county final but will not probably feel like a county final. There won't be that. We talked about the nervous energy and stuff in the dressing room maybe before a game and that type of thing. There's not going to be any of that. There's not going to be any of the, I don't know, will there be a pipe band leading them around on Sunday or anything like that? What would that be like if there's nobody there? The pipe band, actually, there won't be a pipe band because there'd be extra people that would be into the ground. So there's not a hope of anything like that happening. So it's not going to have that kind of county final feel to it, which might necessarily be a bad thing for players because it's an awful lot less pressure on them. If I was to call the game, I've been fairly strong on Shells the last couple of days, so I'd probably maintain that fate. Something I would ask Derek about though, which I think is interesting. The Gorey coach Willie Cleary said just on the whole season and the way things have gone. He said it has actually opened our eyes maybe to unnecessary time that we put into it in other years. I'd be coming back in January training for a championship that really only gets going after Wexford are beaten in August or when they're out of championship. It's crazy on people's lives. This has opened all of our eyes to the positivity of a split season, having a club calendar, having an inter-county calendar so we can plan our lives around that. Would that be something you'd echo, Derek? Would it change your thoughts on, you know, maybe what you're doing when you are involved with a club? Would just the fact of this season and maybe how it was such a kind of a wham bam kind of thank you ma'am kind of season, would it change like the way you would approach if you were involved with the Harriers next year?
Yeah, interesting one in terms of, because I think you have to take it from the perspective of Willie. I know Willie well, great fella. He actually trained at LaSalle for a year or two. Willie, and top class guy, and Gorey are at the top of the scale in terms of, you know, I don't think there's a doubt that Gorey would ever be in relegation battles in Wexford over the years, and I mean this with all sincerity. So it might be easier for Willie to put less into a preparation of a team, or even the context of, you know, being less serious about it. I think the less serious approach was helped in Wexford and in Waterford this year by relegation being taken out of certainly from the Harriers' point of view, having been involved in a few relegations over the years. They felt that was an awful burden on their history, if you like, will they go down intermediate, you know, and that kind of stuff. So I think that has to be taken into consideration, if you like. Would it change the way you prepare? First of all, I think the first debate is the debate that you've probably debated yourselves over the last few weeks, which is the split season. I'm not going to go into it because I've been on the record for the last 2 years, even at the tail end of the Waterford manager's job. I was kind of saying that this was the way forward. I actually wrote an article in the Times about it nearly 20 months ago, the exact kind of thing that GPA, I'm not trying to take credit for, but like De La Salle came back training on the 1st of January last year. Waterford were in the league final. They were due to play 2 games in April. They played 1 game because Waterford got to the league final. They didn't play again until August. I just think certainty is the word, and they'll have certainty if they know the championship is going to be on or starting in the first week in August, second week in August. You know, I think that'll be a factor in it. To answer your question about whether or not you take it as serious, I think we still, there's still a thirst out there for players to take the whole thing serious. Could you condense your activities and condense your preparation into a shorter window? I think you could, because you should be able to get better at your preparatory work ahead of that and say, listen, this is what matters, this is how we're going to play, this is how we prepare physically. There could be a bit more trust with guys preparing physically away from the field, and I think that's a measure that's going to come into across inter-county, never mind club games.
And just in terms of this game then, I mean, I'd probably be just about nudging for Gorey, Conor MacDonald having a player like that up front, a difference maker and what will be a tight game. I'd just about be nudging for them. They've won it more recently as well. What way would you go, Derek?
Yeah, and believe it or not, and it's against the probably logic of how things are going, I'd probably be similar in that I just feel that there's a game in them in the final, that there's a big game in them, that, you know, that Shelmaliers have been going so well, beating the Harriers comprehensively, beating Barntown comprehensively, and I'd say the word in Gorey is like, we're just getting through, we're not hurling well, we're just getting through games and we're doing enough. And, you know, a lot of the focus in the other games, both Oulart and Shell's approach against Gorey the last time has been kind of focused on making sure that our Ferns' approach, that Conor Mac has been kind of well held, and he's had to come out the field almost like Canning over the years to be involved. And you might see him maybe out the field early even on Sunday. You know, you be trying to put yourself in the manager's shoes. Does he need to be out there early, if you like? I know he's brilliant in behind in the air, and he can kind of give you what Galan gives, or Johnny Glynn gives you in behind against 1 against 3. But he might, you know, for early involvement, you might see him out the pitch. I just have a feeling that Gorey will bring the experience to kind of, to the match on Sunday, and we'll get over the line, but only just. But it's very, very hard to call. I think what's very obvious is that outside of probably St. Martin's unexpected kind of exit from the championship, you know, you probably would have said at the start of the year that Ferns and Gorey and Martins and then Shells, you know, would have been the top teams. So I'd say that 2 of the top teams are in the final, which is always good.
So moving on to the Waterford Championship then, Ballygunner against Lismore, it's kind of like the old order there with Ballygunner having won so many titles in recent times, and then there's a bit of a romanticism about Lismore for a couple of reasons. Number one, I think, you know, everyone's kind of followed Maurice Shanahan to some degree, and he's had tough days, and like it's great to see him shooting the lights out. And then of course Dan as well, your old running buddy, the fact that, you know, he's playing there since, what is it, 1993, something like that. He was playing as a 15-year-old and he's still going. So I think in many ways people would love to see a shock here.
Yeah, and look, I think they've always been associated with kind of a fluid playing style as well. You know, they've always been top heavy on forwards, if you like. You know, go back to Dave Bennett, go back to Dan himself, the Growler Daly. You know, when you watch them over the years, they came down to a famous county final in '93, I think, against Mount Sion. And like Growler scored 3 goals here unexpectedly. They beat Mount Sion that day, 92 or 93, can't remember the actual day. But yeah, like they've always been associated with kind of, you know, representing the West. And even, I don't know, there's a brother Dormer, who was a brother in the Lismore's primary school for years, kind of, and the boys would kind of say that he was responsible for himself, and Sean Pender, who's Paddy Prendergast's father, principal of Lismore National School, were responsible for kind of, you know, really pushing the hurling initially. And brother Dormer's in Doon now, doing great work in Doon. So it's yeah, they've always been associated with kind of a fluid style of hurling and scoring a huge amount. And they've always been associated also with anytime you hear Maurice or Dan interviewed, they'll always talk openly about their passion and their love for their place, if you like, their sense of place. And they're really open about that, down to, I think I saw it, of all the years I'm looking at Dan's tattoos, not that I'm jealous in any way of a 6'4" kind of model like Adonis alongside of me on the line over the years, and making me look even more kind of bloody like a character out of bloody Lord of the Rings. But yeah, look, he's just a unique character. I've said this previously, that people see Dan and they see the tattoos and they see the hat turned backwards and they see the kind of you know, they almost think that this fella is kind of off the walls in terms of you know, what way he is. But he's extremely affable, extremely kind of bright fella, you know, and he'd often say to me, "Oh, you do that now, Derek, because I wouldn't have the brains to do that." He kind of downplays his kind of very self-depreciating fella. So to see him being as open about Lismore, he'd say to me, he'd often say to me, "I'm hoping to get on now, I'm hoping to get 10 minutes, I'm hoping to get 10, 15 minutes. And even last day, near the end of the game, you know, he came on and there was a ball kind of broke off him in his area, and Maurice got the goal off it, and I could see him, he was kind of, you know, he was kind of not claiming a role in that goal, but he had a role in the goal, and he's, you know, he's still confident in terms of the impact he can make. And obviously, you've said it yourself about Maurice, we've all followed his story, if you like, from battling, you know, with openly battling with tendencies and symptoms around depression, to being able to kind of back up and at it at club level, you know, dealing with the disappointment to be left out of the Waterford squad, and, you know, not answering critics any way he can, but just playing his game and enjoying it. Looks to be really enjoying it, which is great for him personally.
Michael, I'll just bring you in there and show you something to add.
Yeah, 2 questions for you, Derek. I don't know if you saw the picture going around. Dan had the number 10 and the number 14 written on either of his calves. Number 1, I'm just wondering, do you know what was going on there? And I always was interested with Maurice wearing the number 21 with Waterford. Could you just maybe outline to viewers what was the scenario there as well? Okay,
I'm going to come across childish, but I'm going to come across even more childish now, but I have to tell the truth, I suppose, that I'm in front of you. But the first one on Dan's tattoos, I think in 2018, the year that we resigned from Waterford, one of the day, actually, would you believe it was the day that we drew at Tipperary, the day the ghost goal. Whatever way I looked that day during the match, it was noticeable that it was, if you remember that summer, 2018, it was really hot summer. And whatever way I noticed on the line, Dan had always have a pair of shorts on him, and whatever way I noticed, he had the socks knee high, almost Thierry Henry, like, in terms of his where he had the socks. I kind of said to myself, Jesus, in my own mind, you know, I'll be, and you want to go inside the mind of an inter-county manager and have a match. I said, geez, that's unusual. Kind of just said to me in my own mind, but Dan has his socks up. But after the match, then he had the socks down and he had these tattoos of 10 and 14 on his calves. He was after getting them in terms of the positions he played with Waterford and Lismore over the years, right half forward and full forward, and, you know, to me, that kind of is an absolute kind of synopsis of the type of character he is. You know, those things are really relevant to Dan's life and important to his life. No different than his family, where he has tattoos of his family members, or his most famous tattoo is his book cover, which is, if you don't know me, don't judge me. And, you know, I'm not one to judge Dan, because I know him well and I know the type of character he is, but, you know, you'd have some people maybe listen to the podcast and say, sure, that's, why would you do that? But Dan is Dan, and he would associate the two positions as being absolutely, completely, you know, relevant to his life development, not just his hurling development, right half forward and full forward. And that's the answer to those things, and he hit him well that day, and he was kind of so the whole idea of him being out front at times, there was a little bit of kind of I don't think I'll show these today, like, you know, so he was covering them up maybe for a day or two. On the 21 for Maurice, I suppose I would have been a big advocate, still am, of the whole idea of squad numbers. I've believed in it for a period, because, you know, then there's no kind of acrimony amongst yourselves as journalists, or, you know, at least, you know, there's no, you know, people, you know, in Waterford over the years, I would have been subjected to, we'd say, not a lot of kind of, I would say, unwarranted criticism for someone buys a programme and, there's changes, there's 4 changes, or there's 5 changes, and it leads to kind of negative connotations. To solve that, the soccer way of putting in the panel on the middle pages, and the fellas know that the team is announced, and I think that had solved that. So, long story short, this 2015 or 16, I think 15, Maurice was only coming back from injury, and we were using him as a sub in a relegation promotion match against Wexford. Number 21 on his back came in, had a huge influence. Came in the next game, 21 had a huge influence, and it became a bloody superstitious kind of omen then around the number as much as anything else. And I think Maurice referenced that in a John Fogarty article last Saturday, where he kind of referenced the fact that it was more Derry was into, but it was kind of a meeting of minds in terms of keeping it going, and it wasn't the case of just maybe annoying people on the outside. We wanted to form our own identity, you know, and Kevin was 10 all the years, and he never played right half forward, even though he was picked as an all-star right half forward, I think. He never played right half forward in his life in my tenure, and he, you know, he had 10, Tyg had 5, Austin had 6. We believed in that, I suppose. Looking back on it now, you kind of say, would you change it? Possibly, but, you know, you have to put your own stamp and your own ways on it, and the boys believed in it too, so we'll stand over.
Now, maybe this is a bit of an awkward one as a former manager. Like, is Maurice playing to the level where you'd be kind of thinking twice, maybe Liam Cahill could look at him again? Because we hear of all these big scores, but sometimes, you know, a certain amount of that can come from playing an awful lot from free, so we wouldn't have been at the matches. It's probably very difficult to see less more matches, but is he playing at that inter-county standard at the minute?
He is, Shane, now. He is, and I tell you, he and I'm not saying he should be or shouldn't be, that's everyone's prerogative, because it'll be a decision for Liam and Mikey Beavens and Stephen Frampton and Steve Malunphy, in that they may weigh up the whole, we'd say, the spirit that they've garnered from early in the year, the pre-COVID training, we have our bubble now and this is our best bubble going forward. So they may do that and wait till next year, or they may go with, listen, it's a whole new season. Do we recall Shane Bennett? Do we have a go at getting, like Philip Manny was the outstanding player on the field for Ballygunner last Saturday night? Do we have another go at Philip? You know, and that's probably every manager's, like, I'd imagine if Peter Duggan was back in the country for Clare in the morning, I'm not sure is he, I'd imagine Brian Lohan will go to his door and say, listen, this is the situation, it's a one-off championship. So that's Liam's prerogative, but is he playing at the level he is? And the interesting one was last Sunday night's battle with Conor Prunty was really intriguing. Conor Prunty is one of the best man markers in the country, I'd argue. Really good. Took up John Conlon last year. Actually, in fact, if you really analyse the Tip Waterford Munster Championship game last year, Jamie Callan got the goal when it was handed over by Jason Ford, I think. But up to that, Conor Prunty had a really good game at Jamie Callan in an overrun and overworked defence.
And he marked Patrick Horgan out of it in the league this year.
He did really good, did really well. So Conor Prunty won the battle for the first 20 minutes against Maurice. 24 minutes in the game last Sunday night, visibly out in front, winning the battle, you know, followed the full forward, followed the centre forward. Cleverly enough now, and this is where I was impressed with Maurice. Maurice then took himself into the right corner of the field, right into the right corner of the stand almost in Dungarvan, and almost was kind of not involved for about 7 or 8 minutes. And at the same time, Lismore were racking up scores. And I thought his game management was excellent in that he was taking Prunty away from the equation. He was bringing him into a corner where he wasn't involved. Then just before half time, he had a play where he handed it out to Finbar or to Oisin O'Gorman. He got a great point. He got another point from play. Started the second half, he got 2 more points from play off Conor Prunty. And then Abbeyside bit the bullet, I suppose. They kind of said to themselves, we need Prunty driving us forward. So they took Prunty off him with about 12 minutes to go. And Morris got another goal and a point on the back of that. So you could say it was probably if you're doing percentages on it, it was probably a 50-50. Or sorry, it was probably 70-30 to start to Prunty, and then Morris won the battle as it materialised.
Michael, just to bring you in there, do you think Ballygunner's dominance is a good thing for Waterford hurling, to have a team playing at that elite level and then the county manager can pick for them, or is it probably not a great thing? And like Passage were in the other semi-final, last team to win a county title other than them since 2013.
Yeah, it's a tricky one. Derek would probably be more knowledgeable to answer that just from knowing it. But there are 36 games unbeaten. Obviously, haven't been beaten since 2013. Have a Munster title kind of along the way as well. You look at the Mahonys, Daisy Hutchison, Shane Sullivan, who was obviously playing with Waterford back in the day as well. There's a plethora of options there for a county manager, but they're definitely totally dominating the scene. It'd be a massive upset. Like I haven't seen the odds for that game, but I imagine Ballygunner could be 1-10 or 1-16 to win that game. Just such as their dominance, and I'd say they're well odds on to be winning even the Waterford Championship at this stage. So I wouldn't mind just even seeing what Derek thinks about that. Like, they're 36 games unbeaten, Derek. There doesn't look like any sign of them slowing down. Like, is a dominance like that good within a county, or do you think it can kind of, I don't know, maybe dilute what other clubs are doing within the county, because they know even if they get everything together, it's still going to be very hard to win a championship?
Yeah, it's a great question. And look, they won their 4th minor A title in a row last night, and I've said this again, I'm not trying to look to the future, but they're going to be better when, like, we would argue that in the school here, Patrick Fitzgerald is one of the best young hurlers that's ever come through the school. He's minor last night. He scored 112 out of 113 for Ballygunner in the minor A county final last night. He's a first cousin of the man. He's minor again next year. So I would argue that when Patrick Fitzgerald and Brian O'Sullivan is back from his travels, that when Patrick Fitzgerald and Brian O'Sullivan are in a forward line with Peter Hogan, Desi Hutchison, Barry Sullivan, Kevin Manny, Pádraig Manny, I said Peter Hogan, I'm missing someone obvious there, but I feel they'll be better, you know, because their age profile. But to answer your question, I suppose, is it good or isn't it good? The first thing I will say is that it has an impact on Waterford, in that Ballygunner have been brilliant servants of Waterford. They've been brilliant. You know, there haven't been a case of, you know, sometimes you might hear of, we'll say in Crossmaglen or Slotneil, that you hear echoes of, sure, the Derry situation doesn't matter, or the Armagh situation, it's all about the club. Or traditionally you might have heard it in Galway back in the mid-90s, where sure, the clubs are more important. And you take the Mannies, you take Shane Sullivan's influence on Waterford. You know, Pádraig is captain of Waterford this year. During my tenure, Barry Coughlin, Sock, they're all brilliant servants of Waterford. So they're ambitious fellas at inter-county level. Is it good for Waterford in general? I would argue that it's up to ourselves. Look, I was very, very strong on saying that I felt that De La Salle would be the ones that would kind of, you know, challenge them the most this year, if you like, and that hasn't materialised. But that's the nature of how it can work out in any sport. But is it good? I actually don't think it's a bad thing, because I think we could learn a lot from the atmosphere around Ballygunner in Waterford. Is asher the numbers. The lazy analysis of Ballygunner is asher the numbers. They have huge numbers, and how could you compete with them? And instead of saying how can you compete with them, I think it's time for all clubs to kind of keep working on their structures. Ballygunner have huge coaching structures. Again, that minor game last night, just watching it from being streamed here, and I couldn't help but notice during the water break, here was Stephen O'Keefe with Keane Try on the goal for Ballygunner, mentoring him, coaching him, you know, bringing his hurleys from one goal to the other. You know, just small little things where their players are very hard working and players, and I think other teams and other clubs could learn a lot from how they carry themselves. So I don't necessarily think it's a bad thing, and it certainly won't bother them. They have a great spirit, but on their radar, and on their radar is definitely an All-Ireland club in the next few years, and it has to be in terms of their overall kind of where they want to go. I think that's definitely on their radar.
Yeah, I having played against them a couple of times in challenge matches with Cuala during the height of the summer. They're a very well-oiled machine, and especially during the height of the summer when the ball is flying around the place, really hard team to keep into. Like, they'll obviously be favourites here in the game against Lismore, but Mount Sion against Passage. Michael, just to throw it to you first, I think what's going to be on everyone's mind is Austin Gleeson. 2 games in a row, red cards. We can debate whether they were or weren't, but they'll surely go in as favourites against Passage. I mean, I don't know if Passage been kind of regular contenders since last win at 7 years ago.
Yeah, I just from an outsider kind of looking in, I actually kind of fancy Passage in this game. They've obviously probably shipped a few big enough defeats to Ballygunner. I know they shipped a big defeat to them in a final or semi-final a couple of years ago. But Mount Sion are kind of the city team coming in here, probably with a bit of expectation now, because they weren't expected to beat the performers at the Blondie O'Neill, and I know Austin got 5 points as well. I kind of half fancy Passage because there's a good bit of pressure on Mount Sion. They'll try and tie up Austin Gleeson, make sure he doesn't have that sort of influence on the game. Obviously, a lot is going to centre around Gleeson at the weekend, because you're kind of thinking, okay, he had a straight red the first day in the quarter in the group game, and then he 2 was the last day. Like, is he going to have to mind himself somewhat? Like, he's no use to them in the stands, regardless of whether people think he's been officiated more stricter maybe than other people. He's absolutely no use to them in the stands as well. So he's probably going to have to mind himself and be on guard. But I half fancy Passage in this game. Be interested to hear what Derek thinks. Would that be something, obviously Austin very well. Do you think that'll be something that'll be playing on his mind, and will he be able to go about his business as normal?
Yeah, I think he will be. It's going to sound a contradiction what I'm saying here, but I actually thought he was very well disciplined in a match against De La Sala, even though he got 2 yellows. I actually think, I was watching his body language early in the game. Martin O'Neill actually committed a foul, and Austin was over to him, kind of telling him not to worry about the foul, and I could see his interactions were almost based on, I lead this well today, picked up 2 yellows. But look, I would always say that he needs to be right on the edge, like, of in terms of performance levels, where he needs to be physically. He's in the place where he needs to be and hasn't been in a while, and he's leading that Mount Sion team. And a couple of interesting things behind the scenes here, in that, John Meany took over the Mount Sion team 2 years ago, and expectation levels within Mount Sion, the general opinion would have been they're in transition. That things have changed and they're coming back to the pack. We watched Mount Sion and Ballygunner in county finals in the 80s, 90s, into the 2000s, in county final after county final, thinking we'd never get to a county final in De La Salle. So I think the expectations lessened, which allowed them to be very dangerous. They were beaten in 2 minor A county finals by Ballygunner by a point. So what happens then is you have players that slip under the radar in terms of people's outside opinions. So you have Pádraig Fanning's son, PJ Fanning, really good player at cornerback, albeit I think he pulled a hamstring at the end of the De La Salle match. You have players that have Evan McGrath, you have guys that have come in under the radar. Anthony Kerwin's son, Alan Kerwin, really good player. So Mount Sion have kind of had that freedom of lesser expectation on them as a historically kind of really, really competitive club. And John Meany has brought in, first of all, he has Darren Ryan as part of his background team, who's actually Austin's uncle. And Austin has real respect for Darren, I know, by him, and you can see a kind of a connection there that will drive the best out of Austin. And Ger Cunningham, who was involved with Thurles Sarsfields over the years, was involved with Laois, when Cheddar was there. Really good coach by all accounts. I know the boys would be kind of raving about his involvement, is an influence there as well. And Jim Green is part of the background team. So what they have is a nice mix of the traditional kind of hierarchy within Mount Sion and Jim Green and John Meany, and they've an outside influence there as well. So they're, they seem to have all their boxes kind of ticked in terms of their approach from the outside. But to go back to answer your question, I think Austin, I think that the encouragement from the line will be keep going. You might have been unlucky there. I saw the second yellow, Kevin kind of bounced straight up off the ground, to be fair to Kevin Moore, and the second yellow was probably debatable in my opinion, but I think it'll be more of the same. And I just think he's in a good place. He's in a good place, and I know you'll say, all right, he had the red against Rome Moore, and you're contradicting yourself, but I think he's in a good place where it'll be steadily improving for Austin into the winter, hopefully.
Yeah, because even if you go back to the league against Tipperary, it's 3 red cards this year, and I would have never considered him necessarily a player who's going to get a load of red cards. He does play on the edge and that. But just to go to the body transformation thing, that kind of, with that probably comes a change in mentality too, because you go from, this is a guy who's got great talent and it feels like he's almost letting it slip through his fingers, to, right, he's taking it seriously then again.
Yeah, and like, you know, it's he's a young chap, like I keep saying, you know, I remember listening to an interview with Ollie Canning a number of years ago when Joe had played his 4th year minor and our 3rd year minor, and he was coming into the Galway senior panel, and Ollie said he's going to go travelling, like, and it was almost an uproar, like, in Galway circles. Oh, geez, what's he doing going travelling, or where's he going? Or, you know, Austin has won the hurler of the year in 16. As I often say, he was very harsh on himself in 17 because, you know, he didn't go well in the final no more than we didn't go well on the line in the final. You know, like, you know, we all didn't go well in the final, but up to that, you know, he'd been very, very consistent. You know, against Offaly, against Wexford, Kilkenny, against Cork, a goal that you'll never see in your lifetime again, if you like. So he's been very harsh on himself. So the dip mightn't have been as exaggerated as people say. So he's had to live with the focus of the hurler of the year, etc., almost Tony Kelly-ish, and then come again. And now I would see it that no matter who's involved in, whether it's Liam Cahill, whether it's myself, whether it's Gorey Fannin, that there's a moment where you have a personal kind of epiphany moment where you kind of say, you know what, this is what I want out of life. You know, he's working with TQS now. He's steadily employed. He's happy. He's in great shape physically, and you know, I'd imagine that when you transform yourself physically, and I know from listening to the lads over the years that you just feel good about yourself, and I think anyone's entitled to feel good about themselves, and that's where he is. And I'd say he'll be able to live now with the consequences of not playing well either as well. You know, whereas at times them things would have hit him hard. If he doesn't go well, he's probably becoming a little bit more, geez, I hate saying it, like the Dublin footballers that they're process driven or whatever, you know what I mean? And that's where he's going, but it takes fellas longer to get there than other lads, you know.
And just briefly then, do you see Mount Sion coming through here?
I think Mount Sion will win now, but I said De La Salle would beat them last Sunday, so but I think Mount Sion will win. I think they're confident, they're dangerous now when they're confident like that, and I keep saying it, we're ignoring the fact that Martin O'Neill is, you know, was on the Waterford panel with us. He's a really good player. Stephen Roach, really good player. Austin, really good player. Owen Whelan, really underrated players. They're really good players as well. And I think Passage have, again, this year, like there was Pa Welch wasn't involved from the start of the year. Jason Roach only came on as a sub. Thomas Connors not involved. Again, Michael Walsh went in the first interview this year after the match. It's the youngest Passage team ever played. So there's a certain freedom in that. But I think the journey will end on Saturday.
The Dublin quarterfinals are on this weekend, and just to briefly run through the fixtures: Nafina Fogs, St Vincent's Ballyboden, Kilmacud Crokes, Luke and Sarsfields, St Bridget's against Cuala. Now obviously it's going to be tough for me to talk about Cuala when I'm involved in the panel, so I might throw it over to you, Michael Verney, just to kick that one off.
Yeah, no, I just go quickly fly through the quarterfinals there. Nafina against Fogs. Nafina will be heavy favourites there, having beaten your good self Shane the last day and putting up such a big score. I think it was 323. Conor O'Shea, son of Eamon, in charge of. Is he in charge of Nafina?
No, he's in charge of Fogs.
In charge of Fogs, okay, yeah. So like they'll obviously be fairly well prepared. He took charge of the UCD Fitzgibbon teams, coaching Dublin minors as well. I would still imagine that Nafina would have far too much there. Vincent's and Bowden is a very, very interesting game. Bowden kind of, having been in Leinster Club final in 2018, probably dropped a good bit since then, still relying on Conal Keeney to a fair extent. They're obviously going fairly well into football still too, which makes it probably a bit tougher. Vincent's have obviously John Heatherton, Conor Burke, all these sorts of boys as well, the McBrides. That's probably a tight enough game to call. Just going into the Bridget's and Cuala game, obviously a repeat of last year's county final. Cuala coming in this year, probably not with maybe the same confidence, having been beaten. Derek, I know you played against Cuala, and Shane's probably not going to say too much about Cuala. So just a little word on Cuala. Obviously, like one of the best teams in the country on their day. What was your kind of opinion on even how they were going, or reading on how they were going when you met them with the Harriers earlier on the year?
Yeah, well, we won the game on the night now, I think, but it was interesting in that I think some of the footballers weren't available for Cuala on the night. So obviously the main prong of their attack in terms of Con O'Callaghan, the main, out ball, if you like, in terms of his involvement, I think he gives a different dynamic to Cuala altogether. But yeah, I would have always said like that and it's about cycles as well. And you'd be slow to kind of say it's an end of a cycle, but looking at and Shane will love me for this now. He loved me for this, but you kind of I'll give you my kind of, first of all, a comparison kind of thing. We played Kilmacud Crokes. I said this to you, and there seemed to be a kind of a. I think we scored 28 points and they got 27. They scored 6 goals on us, and they put 3 or 4 goals on us early. They had a forward line. Quayle and Conway, O'Sheen, O'Rourke, Fergal Whiteley was in the forwards that night, Shawnee McGrath, Big Ronan Hayes, and I was saying, fucking hell, like 5 kind of inter-county forwards, really physically well developed. And Cuala would have been always that team over the last 2 or 3 years that struck me as having that kind of, that physicality, that organisational kind of ability in terms of what they do. So that night, I felt that they were stale, but I felt they were just a little bit kind of. Their cycle wasn't as kind of it wasn't as kind of the hunger, I suppose. And I'm not questioning their hunger, but this is only a one-off challenge match where they're missing a number of opponents, and it's in a field in Wicklow, and we're kind of trying to get things going. But we came away from that game buzzing. So our attitude to that game in the Harriers that night was, we're playing the All-Ireland champions from last year. So that kind of brings its own difficulty for Cuala every time they go out, never mind when they have a full team. So now, having said that, and talking to Willie, and I know Willie well, and a brilliant man, Willie Maher, that's over Cuala. It's they had 2 kind of what would be perceived as being messy wins. They won well, but they still felt they weren't happy with how they were going, I felt, and then Nafina put a score on them. So I'd imagine it's been a kind of circling of the wagons in terms of behind the scenes motivation, and people are saying you're gone, you're finished. It might be old fashioned stuff like that, but it might be process driven as well, given the characters that are involved. So there's probably still a sting in him, and there's probably a couple of stings in him still. And I think that's what they'll be hoping. They'll be hoping to revisit the freshness, the hunger of last year, the year before, in the next 2 or 3 rounds, if you like. That's what, other than that, sure, they're out. But there seems to be an emerging of perceptive talk around Nafina, around Kilmacud, around kind of Ballyboden have got their ship in order, having been heavily defeated by Kilmacud in the first round. And Cuala have come to the bottom of the pile in terms of talk, is what I'm saying. Not in terms of ability, but in terms of talk. And that makes them exceptionally dangerous in my view. That makes them kind of a team that kind of circle the wagons amongst themselves, and all they need is one game to flow. Like someone said to me, I was with someone last weekend, and they said to me, Ballyhale last year, I think they lost all their league games, or they lost a number of league games, they drew, and next minute, before you knew it, I think someone said to me, well, the first round of you win your first round of the championship is the same as winning every league game, and next minute Ballyhale are All-Ireland champions. The point I'm making is that Cuala have that historical advantage that they can lean on what they've done to go again. But that's a dangerous mantra as well, that they have to bring it, I suppose, and that'll be my impression of them. I still think there's a championship in them, if you want me to be honest.
Michael, I'll let you back in there. Just final thoughts on that.
I bet you will. You don't want to say anything. Everything that's going on behind the scenes. Saying there, obviously, he mentioned Crokes. Crokes are out against Lucan Sarsfields at the weekend as well, coming up against the likes of the Crummy brothers, Chris and Paul, and Peter Kelly. But they're probably, it's funny, as a result of that defeat to Nafina, and just even some of the results, as Derek says, Cuala are still there, but just maybe people are kind of forgetting them for the moment, and it's very, very easy. Like, they haven't been beaten in a semi-final, they're not gone. They've had a chance to circle the wagons, as he said. So I'd imagine they would regroup. Shane, you might even go into the Galway Championship there now as well. A couple of interesting ties there, a couple of dead rubbers, but a couple of interesting ties as well.
Yeah, we're looking towards the latter end of the league stages here, the group stages. So just to run through the fixtures. Tommy Larkins are against Capitagle, Tina Abbey Denairi against Loughrea. So that's actually Matty Kenny against Greg Kennedy's club. Obviously the 2 boys involved with Cuala, and obviously now Dublin as well. Then the Group 2, Turlockmore against Clare Bridge, Oranmore Marie against Lean Mellows, and Group 3, Sarsfields against Castlegar, and St Thomas's against Portumna. Michael, was there a game in particular you were interested in talking about there?
Yeah, there's a couple of games in Group 1, Tommy Larkins and Capitagle. Capitagle are struggling a bit. Obviously beaten in the last two semi-finals, beaten by a point or a score, I think, in both games. But they're under pressure. They only scored 1-2 from play against Loughrea, beaten by 4 points, 116 to 112. They just don't seem to be motoring well for whatever reason. The Mannion brothers, Jan Donald, are key for them. Declan Cronin will be a big player as well. He'll probably pick up either Jason Flynn or Ronan Murphy at the weekend. And Dan Nevin will be a big player for Capitagle too. But they're under pressure. It's awkward kind of a game to call. And probably side with Tom Atkins just because they're probably in a bit of better form than them. The other some of the games, like, there's a lot of dead rubbers with the likes of Portumna and Clarenbridge already gone down to Senior B. So probably the other ones that would stand out are Oranmore Marie against Lean Mellows in Group 2. So the winner goes through there. Mellows beaten in the final the last 2 years and were champions obviously in 17. They'd probably be expected to come through there. They're only narrowly defeated and more. And probably the game of the weekend is probably Sarsfields and Castlegar, both narrowly defeated by St Thomas's. Winner goes through here. As I said, Portumna already gone down to Senior B. Both of these lost narrowly to Thomas's. Castlegar, the most successful team in Galway hurling history with 17 county titles, obviously an All-Ireland title as well, back in the 80s. And Sarsfields have Kevin and Joseph Cooney in attack. I think Joseph Cooney hit 6 points from playing one of the games earlier on the year. This is probably the game of the weekend. I think Sarsfields beat Castlegar in the 2018 quarter-final as well. So there's a couple of dead rubbers, but definitely a couple of really, really interesting games there.
I'm hearing that Fergal Lynch, the Clare man, he's over at Castlegar. I think they played a challenge match recently or since their last game. They might have a couple of injuries in the forward line here. And Sarsfield, I think Joseph Cooney's getting better all the time after coming back from Australia. Any particular thoughts on this one, Derek, or any of the other games in Galway?
Yeah, well, the team I'm interested in watching in Galway over the last few years is Thurlough in that we actually came up against them in the Faythe semi-final last year, and they just absolutely steamrolled us in Delasal. They Faythe A final down in Cork, and I think they won the Faythe the year before as well. So in terms of development, the other interesting thing is, and I've said it, Stocky Burke, I think, plays at midfield for his club, and it's just an interest to see what way that'll develop in terms of the Galway Championship. I know Eamon Cleary, who's the manager of Sarsfields. I know how diligently he's worked with that team over the last couple of years. So I think looking at their performance against Portumna in the first round and subsequently their narrow loss to St Thomas's, you'd kind of be fancying Sarsfields to win that game against Castlegar just from afar, as I said, because I know, that if you look at Morrissey and you look at Kevin Hines and you look at the Cooney element in terms of Sarsfields are a team that seem to be working really, really diligently ahead of the championship, if you like, and could have a say in it yet. So it's an interesting championship in that, I think Michael said it there, like Portumna and Clarenbridge. Am I right in saying that he said that they're gone to Senior B? It's kind of a dead rubber game. So it's when I think back to our own All-Ireland club semi-final in 2012 against Clarenbridge, you kind of how things change, I suppose. And I was lucky enough to play in unlucky enough to play in an All-Ireland club final in 08 against Portumna, where they put 20 points on us, and it's just interesting to see, not the fall from grace, but how things can change based on maybe a team or a club working really hard at juvenile level and seeing it through, if you like. So it'll be interesting to see those clubs restructure, redevelop over the next couple of years. But the Galway Championship looks a high quality championship, like the Limerick Championship. I think it's a standout championship in terms of quality,
Actually, interesting, you mentioned Limerick. That championship isn't going to get going again for, I think, another few weeks. And on Instagram I've seen Aaron Gallan with what looks like a broken finger and the hand up in a like he's up in his small little cast on his finger by the looks of things anyway, and he's in a sling. So interesting to see there. Their neighbours in Clare, so the quarterfinals are on this weekend. Broadford against 6 Mile Bridge, Ballier against Kilmaley, Aero Guinness against Cratloe, and Ina Kilnamona against O'Callaghan Mills. Ballier, 8th successive quarterfinal, looking pretty good against a Kilmaley team who probably not too many people talk about, but there's a bit of quality there, Michael.
No, there definitely is a bit of quality there. Obviously, Conor Cleary, who kicks football with Milltown Malbay, obviously will be coming from a hurling or a football stronghold, would be a mainstay of the Clare hurlers. He's definitely one of their main men. I suppose every time you look at a Ballier game and you're thinking, do the opposition have someone or some sort of a plan where they can halt kind of Tony Kelly's gallop? And I just probably don't see it. I just probably don't see Kilmacud having enough there. Very hard to see Ballygunner not going through. A lot of disgruntled Clare people with me and you because we didn't have Tony Kelly in one of our most skillful players in the country. Now, that's not to say he's not very, very skillful, but I didn't think he was at the high end of it, and we're probably going to get more abuse as a result of that as well. Yeah, Ballygunner definitely be one of the. You're definitely like looking at them being in the last four. Find it hard to see them beaten there. Obviously, Davy's 6 Mile Bridge going up against Broadford, very, very hard to see them beaten as well. Fairly star-studded crew there with 6 Mile Bridge. You have Tim Crowe as manager, Davy as coach, and then Saoirse Bulfin as coach as well, which will just tell you the level of preparations that clubs are going to now. But Cratloe then as well. Cratloe is an interesting one. Like, Cratloe have been kind of locked down for the last good while. They're coming up against Aero Guinness. They're going to have some amount of traffic over the next while on their players. Like, you're talking about dual players that are probably going to be playing every 4 or 5 days for the next while if they can keep winning. So it'll be interesting to see if they're able to keep that going as well. Yeah, it's going to get very tricky. And then just to quickly jump on, like, the Kildare Senior Hurling Championship starts next Monday and Tuesday, the minute they come out of lockdown. So you have Kyle Dove against Aero Corriquill and Leixlip against Naas. Naas obviously ended the famine last year, their first county title in 17 years. But again, those guys must be wondering whether their championship is going to take place at this stage. They're only getting, like, it's gas. They're only getting cracking now. They're playing their first round on Monday, the day after the Wexford Hurling Championship will be over. Which I just think is mad, and those guys must be thinking, a load of really, really strong hurling clubs there, mad hurling men in Kildare, and they must be thinking, like, geez, we're starting off here, are we even going to get finished? Do you know what I mean? I just think it's an interesting kind of narrative there.
Derek, any thoughts on that Clare Championship or anything else you mentioned there?
Yeah, I just picking Michael up on the last point. The interesting thing for me on all those points is we'd say, for instance, in our own club now, Kevin, Moran and the boys are out of the championship. Like, it's now, when will the interaction be with Liam Cahill and the lads? When, will that be revisited now in terms of an early reintroduction to the Waterford setup or to setups within, Lee Chin is out with the Harriers. I know Lee is going to play the football with Sarsfields and that, but when do they get back going, and who will be at an advantage or disadvantage? I think that'll be fascinating coming into the championship. On the Clare Championship, we'll be talking about Kelly. I think Clonlara put Oisin O'Brien. Oisin O'Brien was kind of a sticky cornerback that would be over the years, and everywhere he goes he's man-marked. I know when Ballygunner met them a few years ago, they pinned and fell on him, and he's man-marked, and he's just able to deal with it, Kelly, and I think that's an interesting thing. Davy and 6 Mile Bridge, it seems to have fallen nicely for Davy in terms of the split season. He's able to probably devote all his time now at the moment to 6 Mile before he gets back involved in the Wexford juggernaut, if you like. So I'd fancy 6 Mile Bridge to come through overall in that. The interesting one will be the Cratloe one, because we'll be talking afterwards. If Cratloe win and go on and win the championship, we'll be talking retrospectively about the fact that Mr. Lockdown helped them and we need to do as much and they didn't need to be together at all and blah 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 and so that'll be an interesting dynamic. But the real interesting point for me is the players that are now idle, shall we say the Bennetts are out in Ballysaggart, guys that are finished in their championships. I'd love to know about the interaction with the county setups and when they'll be involved, or are they just following individual programs. I think that'll be the most interesting development for me when fellas go out of the championship.
Yeah, I've definitely heard anecdotally of small little groups meeting up with county coaches, but of course can't really start naming names because you're getting yourself in hot water then. Just to run over a couple of fixtures in Meath, Longwood against Killlion, Blackhall Gales against Kilmessan, in Roscommon Oran against Four Roads, Porrick Pierces against St Dominic's, Radoter against Kiltale, and St Peter's Dunboyne against Navan in Meath also, by the way. I just skipped over that. In Kilkenny, these sort of league finals, the Shields, you have Loughlin Gales against Dixborough, and Bennett's are in Bennett's Bridge then James Stephens against Clara. Is it kind of a poison chalice playing in games like that, Derek, do you reckon? I mean, no one's going to be celebrating too hard winning a Shield final. No,
and say the Village have won their 2 league games to date, and then they find themselves they drew one, didn't they, with O'Loughlin's, apologies, yeah. and they won their other 2 games, so they're in a Shield final. But at the end of the day, in Kilkenny more than anywhere, it comes down to the the championship. You know, it comes down to the championship. You take a team like the Roar, who lost their league games, and they've drawn Ballyhale in the first round of the championship. You know, the draws were made for the first round of the championship proper. So the Roar hadn't been going well, and then to kind of compound matters, they draw Ballyhale in the first round of the actual knockout championship. So, you know, you can imagine the mood in there. You're trying to be probably, you know, positive down in the field this year and say, oh, this is the right time to get Ballyhale. And then the reality dawns then that it's actually the wrong time to get Ballyhale, in terms of, you know, a Ballyhale team that'll be hurting after being defeated by O'Loughlin. So I think they actually, without being absolutely dismissive of them, and here's the contradiction, they count for nothing in Kilkenny. You know, O'Loughlin sticks for Clara and James Stevens have their eye on one thing, and that's winning the championship and not win the league or a shield.
Yeah, and like having watched Ballyhale last weekend against Danesford, they look like they're coming back to themselves a little bit, even though like Evan Shefflin wasn't playing, and they're still not a top gear, Michael, but I mean you wouldn't really bet against them coming on a run like they have the last few years.
No, as I said to you, Shane, in the previous show as well, I think things will have come nicely for them. New manager in there, massive presence gone from the line with Henry gone. James O'Connor comes in. Obviously, Derek probably has a fair knowledge of him. He's a Waterford man as well. He comes in, he's without his centre back with Mick Fennelly after retiring. He's trying to bed in a couple of his ideas, I'm sure, bed in his new players. He wouldn't have actually had them for that long at all. If you're looking at lockdown, he would have been with them probably a month, I'd say, before lockdown. Then would have had no access to them really for 3 months. He's only kind of bedding in there now. I think it's a perfect scenario. They've probably realised some maybe like little small things that they need to work on through defeat, and even drawn with Tullaroan and a heavy enough defeat to O'Loughlin's. So I think it's set up for them to go on a big run, to be honest with you.
Just to run through a couple other fixtures, you mentioned Kildare there. Coyle Dover against Aerogue, Curraquill, Leak Slipper against Naas. Naas ended a bit of a famine last year to claim a first title in 17 years. Ardclough against Selbridge, Confey against Clane. In Antrim, actually, there was plenty of drama last weekend because there was draws between Rossa and Dunline, 18 points to 15, and Ballycastle and St John's. So they're at the end of their group stages more or less now. There's plenty of fixtures there. Then in Carlow, there was the case of there was a COVID for one of the club members in Mount Leinster last weekend. So I was nearly wondering would that get called off, but they ended up playing St Mullins anyway, and having been 10 points to 5 ahead at half time, Mount Leinster won by 17 points to 10. So they're through, and they're against Michael in the next round. So Mount Leinster against Michael is one semi-final. Ballinkillen against St Mullins in the other one there. And I think James Doyle might be injured, so that would obviously make things more difficult for St Mullins too. And Ballinkillen wouldn't exactly be a walkover either, Michael.
No, definitely not. It's funny, like St Mullins got all the way to the Leinster final last year and ran Ballyhale like relatively close. But they drew with Ballinkillen in the county semi-final last year and only beat them after extra time, and then go on this magnificent run. So it's the classic case of in GA, you know, if you're beaten in a quarter final by a point or two by the county champions or something like that, you think, we could have won the county title last year. So I'm sure they were looking on and thinking, you know, we weren't actually that far off. They beat them in the league section of the championship 2 weeks ago by 9 points as well, 3-14 to 14. Now I'm not too sure if Mullins had their full team that evening, but this will be an awful lot tighter than, you know, just looking at it and saying, oh, Mullins were in the Leinster final last year, they're going to win it. Everyone would probably think it's going to be a Mount Leinster Mullins final, but Ballinkillen definitely have something to say about that.
Yeah, Derek, would you have seen much of the Carlow Championship? I'm sure you've seen Mount Leinster and St Mullins over the years.
Yeah, and again, just from my involvement with the Harriers, we actually played Michael in a challenge in Michael during not during the lockdown, but obviously when the restrictions were lifted. But and again, I always think there's kind of a Kilkenny element to the Carlow style in terms of just because they're living so close that they kind of, and I know in some of the senior teams and intermediate teams have competed in the junior and intermediate Leinster leagues in Kilkenny that are organised in Kilkenny, so there's a huge element of that to the way they play, but very serious about the hurling. And even the facilities in Michael the night we were up there in terms of the lights and the facilities that are on display there. But look, their teams, looking at last year and looking at, everyone knows about the Marty Cavanias and all those guys and the Doyles and the Englishes and all those fellas that are involved at that level, but they're teams that take it as, without being patronising, as serious as any De La Salle or any Ballygunner. and they challenge themselves to be better than anyone else. So it'll be interesting to see the development. It could Michael make a breakthrough there. I'd love to see it because I know how hard they're working behind the scenes.
And just a couple of other fixtures there. St. Feckin's are against Knockbridge and Louth. Another Roscommon fixture that I hadn't mentioned was Roscommon against that league, and in Down you've got Breda against Ballygalget and Ballycran against St. Patrick's. So just some final thoughts for the weekend. Derek, does it take anything out of it that you don't have skin in the game now in terms of watching a club that you're either involved in or your own club De La Salle, that you don't have skin in the game at the moment? Does it affect your enjoyment of it?
It probably does, to be honest. It probably makes you a little bit more relaxed. It probably makes you engage in a bit more eating of junk food, watching the match. Everything changes really. To be honest with you, I was probably looking forward to a semi-final this weekend with De La Salle's involvement, and yeah, it does. You can you're more not more relaxed watching it, but you're kind of watching for things like I watched the All-Ireland final of 18 here last night at home on my own. I just said I watched the Galway Limerick game, and I was trying to figure out what Limerick are doing, and I was kind of watch that, and you're kind of just watching it with the winter in mind in terms of what you might do next or whatever on a personal level. That's the kind of the journey I take for the winter in terms of watching the games. But when you have no direct involvement in it, you're searching for answers, I suppose. You watch Ballygunner's continue the dominance. You're wondering how systematic they are or how fluent they are, or is it a case that they just have the best players in the county and are that much better than everyone else? So you're a conundrum of kind of emotions and thoughts when you're watching the best teams do things. You're looking for something new that a team might be doing, and again, you might simplify it by saying the team that has the best players normally wins the championship. So that's, I do watch it in terms of analysis. But you're kind of thinking about the winter, and I think this year more than ever, and this winter you're kind of thinking about hoping the inter-county championship will go ahead, but also hoping that people will be safe. And I'm thinking more so about returning to school now than anything else, in terms of the implications of that. And even we got the draw for the Harty on Monday, and De La Salle are playing Causeway and Kerry down in Kerry on the 10th of December or 12th of December, and you're just wondering, will it go ahead? There are all the worries and wonders about the GA element of even how the boys will cope in school without having a hurling after school. And we'd normally be out 3 or 4 days a week after school, whether it's first years or second years, and just thinking about that more so than anything else at the moment as regards how that will work. And and I know that's the long-term implications of that could be serious enough.
And just one other thing, while you're mentioning will the inter-county go ahead, would you have a favourite in terms of like the inter-county this year? Because it's a winter All-Ireland, we haven't seen this before, and like you'd think Limerick, they're physically prepared for it, Tipperary should be okay, Kilkenny are dogs of war, and I actually feel like Galway are coming back to themselves. There was a couple of kind of signs during the league there that they're going to be serious again.
Yeah, and look, Johnny Glynn and Joseph Cooney's availability adds to that. Like, you put them in a forward line with Conor Whelan and Joe Canny at 4 or 6 there straight away, and with young Concannon he's probably mid-20s now, I call him young Concannon, but they seem to be going well near the end of the league against Tip. And yeah, I think there'll be a huge amount of emphasis put on the physicality, and I'm not sure will it be as big an issue as people think. Even if Limerick are beaten early, I think they may come in the back door to have a good championship. I think they have the longevity and the panel depth to do that, and I fancy ourselves to do really well in the championship as well. I think there's a freshness there. I think there's a under the radar type mentality there. Expectation is nowhere near what it was in 18 and 19, and that makes Waterford extremely dangerous. And I think it's a team that's well organised, very fit and very united could win the championship, or could get a run in the championship. And I expect Waterford to get a run in the championship. I expect them to be one of the teams that are one of the 4 semi-finalists, if you like. So if you're looking for a dark horse, I don't consider them a dark horse. And I think people will talk about Kilkenny, Galway and Limerick, and I haven't even mentioned Tipperary. I keep saying it, if you have a forward line that includes Bubbles, Shamie Cannon, Jason Ford, a fresh Bonner Marr, I'm missing someone, Dan McCormick working like a dog, Niall O'Mara working like a dog all over the field, and John McGrath, Noel McGrath, you have the people that can hurt you, and I think that could be the difference too. So I've mentioned everyone there. I've covered everyone.
You can't be wrong with that answer. Final thoughts there, Michael, just before we go.
Just interesting. I just hope we get the chance to see this winter All Ireland. It'd be different, obviously, and maybe it could be behind closed doors. But it'd be great if we had something to talk about. Lord knows they'd be lean enough times. Derek could have gone back to watch the 1950 All Ireland by the time we get to Christmas if there's no hurling this winter.
All right, cheers, lads. Brought to you by Slattery Sullivan Insurances in Nenagh. Call 067 56705 and get 10% off all new business quotes with the reference OurGame. Derek, Michael, thanks very much.
Mind yourself.
Cheers, yeah.